Hey everyone, today we have a super special guest. We have Kevin Kreider. He is a life coach and fitness coach. Kevin, welcome to the Fearless Asian Man show.
Thanks, Jeremy. Like your intro.
Nice. I practiced it a little bit. So today we're going to talk about a lot of really fun topics, and the main two topics we're going to talk about will really focus on using self-improvement for Asian guys to improve their confidence, as well as how Asian men have the same internal struggles, despite the fact that they may be located in Asia, such as Singapore or America. So, Kevin, one topic that I would love to cover today with you is how Asian guys can use self improvement to improve their confidence. A lot of Asian guys, quite honestly, come to this podcast because they saw that episode on how to date white girls, and that's really appealing. I know that's a hot topic for Asian guys, but you and I both agree that it's better for Asian guys to build up their masculinity in a healthy way, build up their confidence. So can you kind of give pointers on how Asian guys can focus on their self-improvement and really build that confidence that is long lasting and is secure, as opposed to something that's based on just getting women?
Yeah, that's a really good loaded question, actually, because self-improvement was something that I really avoided for a very long time in my life because I thought, there's nothing wrong with me. What do I need to self-improve for? But when you have that type of attitude, it can be pretty dangerous because that really doesn't leave room for improvement, which is just what it is. It's not saying there's anything really wrong. It's just you want to improve yourself. And since a lot of Asians that I've come across won't seek outside help unless it's business consulting or fashion consulting, right? And for some reason, we're just so consumed with just how we look and what we're wearing. I feel like, especially as Asian men, since Asians in general care so much about the exterior, about how they look, they could really use self-improvement to tie that whole package together, because really a lot of self-improvement, especially for what I do and I know what you do, building up confidence, does come from within. Unfortunately, I can't buy that for you, and you're going to wear it and people are going to go, oh yeah, look at that guy, he's wearing confidence. It's not something like that. But the thing is, it can really improve not just your lifestyle but your mental health, which is huge, since I know a lot of Asians won't seek out mental health. So instead of seeking out mental health, maybe the next best approach is to actually find somebody who will help you to self-improve, like a confidence coach or a life coach or a fitness coach, just to help you improve on that without having to see like a shrink or a psychiatrist for shame reasons or whatever reasons you might have. And I know for me, it's really helped with my confidence seeking coaches. So it's not like I'm a life coach all of a sudden because I never had one. I've had one before. And he was a great tool in a sense, like I get to bounce ideas off of him. He gets to see what he called blind spots in the way I was behaving, the way I was thinking, and to give me another option that could empower me, that would actually give me a better result than my own idea. And I find it's a lot better than just a friend, because friends will tell you kind of whatever they want you to hear. They don't want to hurt your feelings, or they're kind of being a dick about it sometimes, which is not also the best case scenario either. So I just find that self-improvement, if we can just look at it as a way to improve ourselves every single time we seek another coach or a confidence coach, I think if we wrap our head around that instead of just thinking something's wrong with us, why do I need somebody like that? Then I think it would really improve us. It would help us out a lot.
Yeah, and you bring up a really big point I noticed with a lot of Asian guys, especially when they suffer with their confidence, is the fact that I think Asian culture, since it's very shame-based, and we grow up with, like you can't bring dishonor on the family. I know that sounds like it's from Mulan and all that stuff, but like it really is a true thing. Like don't make us look bad. Like you always have to put on a face. That's why Asian guys will burn themselves out in their career. That's why they're going to go into professions that they don't enjoy. I mean, yeah, if you want to be a doctor, great. But like, I know a lot of people are just in med school because they felt like their parents pressured them. And everything actually is kind of based on that idea of looking good. And actually, for a lot of guys, they don't realize it. When they find dating coaches and pickup artists, it's so based on that performance, right? It's like, if I can perform and put on a good show for these women, then I can acquire these women and make myself feel good. So the question I have for you is, how did you go about, and what advice would you give an Asian guy that's kind of on those treadmills of status and looking good? How would you guide him towards actually building that internal confidence via self improvement that's not based on what they look like, what they achieve, and all the girls that they can get?
I would also add into that what you were just saying. It's just basically an approval. All you're doing is looking for external approvals. So, for instance, like, look, we're all going to look for validation somewhere. But if we look for validation through money, we can always find somebody who makes more money. If we're going to look for validation through how many women we can have, there's always going to be more women to be had. And then there's always going to be somebody who has more women. And then we're going to always be under the approval of our parents, our peers, because we're so concerned about what they think of us. And that's where confidence comes in, where you can listen to it, you might get hurt by it. I'm not saying they don't hurt, these things that people say, but you can still take action despite feeling hurt by it or moving on. Like, for instance, like there's this new thing that people say. It's like, being fearless isn't being fearless. Like, you're not going to never have no fear. It's about making the right action and keep moving despite of fear. Same thing with this. Like, look, we're always going to get hurt by what people say. We're gonna always be under scrutiny. We're gonna keep looking for approval. But actually, the people who aren't looking for other people's approval are usually the ones that really stick out. And then, actually, what ends up happening with that is people are looking for your approval. So it actually goes the opposite way. And then you're in the seat. You're in the driver's seat. And I think if a lot of Asian men stop looking for approval from other people, especially a hierarchy of color base, right? So like white people, for instance, I think we would be on the right track to actually self-improvement in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I got to ask the deep and loaded questions because I know I was joking about how a lot of Asian guys, the reason they find my podcast is because I specifically have that tagline AMWF, and they're like, "Oh my God, white girl, right?" Boom.
Yeah.
And I remember actually I was listening to one of was it the TED Talks or one of your videos on how you mentioned there was a little bit of self-hatred and how you used to exclusively date white women. I used to actually fall in that realm too because I was just like, you know what? I'm over Asian girls. They all like white guys anyways, or a lot of them like white guys. And I was using that to kind of prove myself.
Yeah.
So on that note, for the Asian guys who, let's say, are chasing this approval and they might intellectually get what we're saying, what you're saying, how would you kind of move them from that intellectual understanding to really embodying it? Because quite often, I will admit, as a coach, there have been times where I can tell a client the right thing they should know about themselves. And they're like, okay, yeah, like I get it, right? But like it's not really something they truly embody. So for the guys that might be asking, like, yeah, I know like chasing white girls is based on validation and all this other stuff. But Kevin, how do I actually go about not chasing that validation and really feeling it? Because I think a lot of Asian guys, especially, they're very cerebral.
Yes.
I mean me. And like sometimes they spend so much time up in their heads that, they just keep thinking about it and they don't know how to actually feel differently.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start asking other people questions. So, for instance, nobody ever asked me, well, what is it about white girls that you like the most? Or are you trying to chase this approval? So, for instance, I didn't know I was actually chasing this approval until I grew older and I realized, holy shit, I was actually so hurt by Asian women and the things they said to me and the neglect and not paying attention, and then seeing them when they said like, oh yeah, I don't prefer white guys, but then this is just my experience. I'm not saying all Asian girls are like this, but then they do 10 times more for a white guy than they would for any other race. And then they actually end up treating your race even worse. Or, they end up just fondling all over the white guy, like that kind of hurt because it was like, you're telling me that you don't find me attractive because I'm your race, but it's okay to like fondle and go over this white guy. They're doing the same thing though, which is kind of like, okay, you hurt me, so I'm going to sting back. And this self-hatred, though, comes from hating the other race, obviously. I'm sorry, hating the other gender, because you're hurt by it. But it's not going to actually make you feel better at the end, because you're actually just limiting your choices anyway. Whenever you just say, I'm going to date white girls, because when you look at the world, white girls are kind of the minority anyway. And then if you're only going to date white girls, that's a very small population. So if you're not having any luck with dating, it's probably because you literally got rid of 9/10 of the world. And then on top of that, I'm not even including some that aren't even into men, and then you just go even smaller, and then the married ones, and you're like, well, you wonder why. It's because you just excluded yourself to one race, and it's not going to make you feel better. And I've heard so many comments of some Asian guys, especially online, who say, well, it takes a real alpha male to date a white girl. Not really. I mean, I was a pussy back then. I could still date a white girl. It's just that you got to ask enough of them until one says, yeah. And then, it wasn't even like, it's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's not like the best thing in the world, but like, it is what you make of it. Like, if you think and see it as a status thing, then it will become a status thing for you. But unfortunately, you're going to go after the wrong idea and the wrong person for the wrong reason. It's very much just like, you're kind of like looking at the car, but you don't check the hood underneath it. And there could be nothing. There could be literally all the parts missing, but you're like, oh, but it's a Ferrari. It's a Tesla. Yeah, but the Tesla doesn't have any parts in it. It's not working, but you're okay with it because it's like you're so consumed with the approval of having a Tesla in your hands, but you can't take it anywhere. You can't drive it. You can't use it. You just like the name with you. It's like a status thing, It's just like, it's so narrow-minded when you just want to date someone for a certain color. It's just like that. And that's what I see it as.
No, I'm in agreement with you because I've talked to different guys, try to help different guys, and the guys that tend to struggle the most, or one characteristic they have, is they're usually very resentful towards women in general. Whether it's the white girls that reject them, I'm talking about Asian guys, of course, or the Asian women that, let's say, are going after white guys, or for some other reason. Basically, they can find any excuse to resent women because it's an easy thing, right? It's harder to look at yourself. And the thing that I noticed with them is that this is a little bit of a side point, but I think these guys, it goes back to the point about performance and always looking good, is they objectify the shit out of things. Like, they objectify women to make them feel better. And the example might be like this. If you objectify women, there's a high chance that the thrill you get from, let's say, having sex with a woman is the fact based on how she looks, and the fact that you got her not because you actually enjoy the act itself. Because I've had clients who said, like, I actually don't quite enjoy sex. And I'm like, well, not to knock them, but it's just like, okay, that means you're chasing, that, oh, I got this girl. Like, oh, I had sex with her. Versus actually just truly sexually connected with that girl. And that's one thing I noticed, which I think is pretty interesting. But on that note, I do have a question for you. Obviously, we're all very familiar with the issues that Asian guys face, but you mentioned that you found the internal issues that Asian men face have been pretty consistent, regardless of, let's say, Asia or the US. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, so I just recently took a couple trips to Singapore. The last one was very recent. The first one before was 8 years ago, um, or maybe a little bit less. It was 6 to 8 years ago, and I noticed a common theme going on the first time I went to Singapore, which was that it was very heavily white influence, which I didn't realize. And when I got to Singapore, there was an immediate ladder of, or hierarchy, I should say, of what is considered not just superior, but what's attractive. And the white person was first, especially the white male. Then came half Asian, half white, and then came American, Korean, Chinese. They even broke it down into countries, and if you were American born. And I thought that was absolutely insane. But the thing is, it's actually getting very strong, the influence on there. And, there's someone that I had in contact with in Singapore. Actually, I'm kind of dating her currently. And she tells me how much that's happening in Singapore and how she sees it, and it makes her sick. And I don't want to talk for her in this. I'm just telling you what she's been telling me, but it's kind of sickening how all these Asian girls in Singapore just like white worship these white guys. And I didn't know what white worshiping came from until I went to Southeast Asia. And the Asian girls started using that terminology. So I thought it was just a YouTube thing from trolls, but it's an actual real word they use over there. And when I was in Singapore, the first time I started to recognize that, wait, I'm way ahead of myself. I'm going to Singapore in August, but what I've heard is that it's actually getting worse from the girl that I'm dating. Like it just keeps getting worse and worse every year. And the problem is a lot of Asian men are getting resentful and pissed off, but they don't know how to get rid of that or take care of it for themselves. And I find that being a growing problem because if we're getting resentful and pissed off, we're also not only hurting ourselves, but we're hurting other people, but also we're not going to take care of this problem. And we're going to be, if you want to talk about status and being approved and seen, being resentful and pissed off only lowers your status anyway. So it's kind of ironic. Like you don't want your status lowered, but you also don't want to be resentful, but you only know resentful and anger, which also lowers your status that way.
Yeah. And dude, resentment is such a huge one because I know we touched on it earlier in this
Yeah.
podcast, but so many guys, man, like, and I say this with love because I'm not trying to like out the guys that are asking me for help or the Asian guys that want and are willing to be vulnerable to ask for help. So for the guys listening in that position, kudos to that if you're willing to work through your anger. But I think this anger also happens due to the fact that a lot of Asian men grow up in very emotionally repressed households rather. And what happens is I think anger is two sides of the same coin of shame, right? They don't want to feel like they're not good enough. So instead of actually healing that wound, right, they cover it up with anger. It's a very reactionary response. Totally understandable, by the way, because like if things aren't going your way, of course you're going to get angry because it feels a lot better than feeling weak and helpless.
Yeah.
And that ties back to shame. But
I
a lot of Asian guys do kind of struggle with that anger. And the question I have for you is in terms of healing that resentment, especially since a lot of Asian guys, let's be honest, like they haven't really done the inner work in terms of really being able to tap into their emotions and process it. What would be your advice? Because they might be like, oh shit, like he's describing me. Like I feel really angry that these Singaporean women or these Asian women love white guys so much. Like, how do I actually heal myself so it doesn't like control me?
Yeah. So the first is recognition, right? So you recognize that you even feel that way and that it's lingering, for instance. So if you can't recognize it, you can't solve the problem. And then the second thing I would say is to actually get in connection and get help. Get help from another Asian guy or another man who can actually help you through this and connect. And I was just speaking about this yesterday, but like Asian men need to be a lot more vulnerable in the sense that they can talk to another man and express their feelings, um, not out of anger, because that doesn't get shit done, even with another man, but to just explain and tell them and share, and then you can help heal each other that way, actually. I know that a lot of guys kind of scoff when girls get together and go into support groups and cry or talk about their emotions and feelings, but there's something to it. I mean, there really is, because look at all the school shootings that are happening now in the USA. There's so much pent up anger between men, period, that if we actually were seen as like a man still, but being able to be vulnerable and to share emotions and all of that, like, then I think we have a good first step. Like a lot of people I remember saying to me, like, wow, it's amazing you can go on that stage and talk so like truthfully. I'm like, well, guess what? I don't know any other way anymore. I used to hide it back in high school, a little bit of college, right? I used to hide all that shit and pent it up and not want to express anything except through anger. But I saw where it got me. So like, I don't know anything more because I feel so much more released from it. because I get to talk about it a little bit. I probably get to talk about it a little bit more than the average Asian guy too. Like, I mean, like talking to you about it in person like this. A lot of Asian guys, they only have the keyboard to talk about it, but unfortunately, that's not the right connection, and connecting with other men and doing any type of internal work. Like, it's really been a blessing to actually be able to be asked to go on the TED stage and talk to you and do this documentary called The Ugly Model and just lay it all out on the table. It really is, it helps. It really helps heal it. Now, I can look at the scar though, and I can learn my lesson, and I don't have to let that scar affect my choices in the future. And then I can share my lessons, and then I can tell other Asian men, like, hey, look, that doesn't help. It only makes you more angry. But the thing is, a lot of them don't like just want to keep feeling that, which is okay. You're entitled to your feelings. I'm not trying to tell you it's wrong, but you should try to do something with those actions, those feelings you have, to put it in action and to actually maybe put it into your creative work, or put it into your family, or put it into self-improvement. I mean, I think that's why I've gotten so much into self-improvement, because I wanted to really put that energy to good use. And there's no better investment than improving yourself. It's just flat out true. Like everybody always says, bet on yourself, always invest in yourself. It's never a wasted investment.
Yeah, I agree. And I gotta say, especially what you mentioned before, when it comes to attracting women and people actually in general, no one likes an angry motherfucker. Like I'm just gonna put it that simply. It's such like an off-putting energy. And there have been times I had angry clients, and maybe I could have been a better coach, but I'm just like, I actually am starting to not like you because it just bleeds over, because then their ears get closed off to new ideas that will help them. And
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of Asian guys, to reiterate on Kevin's point, it is absolutely crucial and helpful if you're able to find like a band of Asian guys specifically, or even men, and you're able to really, bare your soul, be vulnerable, and have other guys say like, I hear you, man. Like I've been through that. It's fucking shitty, but I'm going to help you get through it. Because I think a lot of times, actually, to get a little bit woo woo and more spiritual and more of the life coachy side of me, is what they're seeking, and this is probably going to stay in the heads of some Asian guys, and years later they're going to realize I'm right. I don't mean that to be like arrogant about it, but they're actually seeking connection and love.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
Isn't that what we're all looking for at the end of it too? Like when we're putting on that Gucci wear, when we're going for that Tesla, when we're going for that job promotion, when we're going for the approval to become a doctor for our family, not bring shame. It's because we're looking for connection and love, but we're getting it from all the wrong places. So the things that we're doing isn't working for us. But the problem is Asian people think, well, and I'm sure this is a human thing too, not just Asians, but Asians specifically too, is that we just keep wanting to do more and more and more of it. We're like, well, we just haven't done enough of it. That's why we don't have it yet. That's not true. It's absolutely the wrong type of life principles and way to live. It's just going to lead to misery, Like I've chased a dollar before. I mean, I remember I got burnt out in personal training. I had a very successful personal training career in just 2 years. And I was like, this sucks making money, actually, like what I was doing, which was personal training. I'm sure if I would have stayed in it, like I would have found a better way, but like it was exhausting, and I thought it was bringing me happiness. I was making money. I had a great corporate job too as a personal trainer, like it was amazing. I had a car with it, and they gave me benefits, and sometimes I didn't even have to train them, like the corporate people, and I got paid. Like it was awesome. I was going out drinking every weekend. I was meeting girls, but like it didn't make me happy, because no amount of that shit would make me happy. And like there's this saying, no one can make you happy, only you can make you happy. I do think you have to go through a little bit of both to realize that. But the problem is when we keep going for that same thing and keep hitting a wall, and we don't know that that's what we're just chasing, and we can just do it a different way, which is to connect with another person, to really honestly connect. I mean, why do you think like confession works so well? Like I know I don't mean to bring up religion or spirituality, like you said, but most religions and spiritual practices have connection forums, right? Talking to another person, a spiritual teacher, and really connecting with them. Same thing with confession and Catholicism. You're really connecting and telling your deepest, darkest stuff and trust it with another person. And there is something very awakening with that when you can do stuff like that. You can bring out all your faults and why you're pissed, and you can get guidance on what to do next. It's an amazing process.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's just so healing when you can actually be heard and connected with another individual and to actually feel their love. Because I think, honestly, I'm going to be real with you, a lot of Asian guys, they don't feel their parents' love. I'm obviously generalizing, but for me, like, I know my parents love me, but I actually remember talking to my girlfriend about this. And she's Hispanic, right? She's Mexican. And, Hispanic people in general, they're very touchy feely, like, they're gonna kiss the shit out of you and everything. And then she was telling how she told her family how, like, Asian households tend to be, like, very physical. And she has a
Yeah.
lot of Asian friends too. And, like, obviously her house was like, oh my God, how else is the kid supposed to know that they're loved, right? And I think this is why a lot of Asian guys, specifically when it comes to dating, uh, specifically when it comes to, like, making moves on girls, they're very not comfortable with their sexuality and being physical, but they're also just not comfortable, like, expressing love, receiving love, and being able to hold space for that, because we haven't been conditioned by our family in terms of being able to receive it. And again, this is not to knock Asian parents, because we all come from the Asian culture and every parent shows love differently. But that has been a trend that I have noticed with Asian guys.
Yeah, and I would say that I've noticed even women do this, right? I've heard stories of women resenting their Asian parents, and that's why they only date white guys, because all the Asians remind them of their parents.
Yeah.
And then you can go deeper into that, but the thing is, you can actually just look at that, and you can have more compassion, that's for sure, for your parents than you're currently doing, and not taking it out on the rest of the world, because your parents are your parents, and they were raised in a certain culture. They're only doing what they know best. They're not doing this shit to make your life worse. They didn't have you and say, how can I fuck this person's life up? Nobody goes into that. You want the best for your kids. And they were just taught a certain way, and it kind of worked for them, in all honesty. But things change. And when we expect everything to stay the same, but everything's changing, that's the problem. It's like we want our parents to change, but they're our parents, but things are changing in our cultural life. Well, guess what? Just accept it, that you are different than your parents. You don't think the same way. You don't feel the same way, but you want your parents to think and feel exactly like you. That's where the problem comes in. You just got to accept and love them for who they are in their generation. And they went through some hard shit. I got to tell you, they probably went through some harder shit than we are going through. I mean, we have the best right now. But we want to go look at our parents and blame them for shit that they only thought like they were doing their best on. That's how they were brought up. We were brought up differently. We were brought up in a culture where it's freedom of expression. We can talk, we can feel, we can hug, we can kiss in public, we can say I love you to another, even like the same gender, and not like think it's, oh, dude, it's gay, bro. It's not like that anymore. At least it's not for me. So we don't have to expect them to live like us, and that's where we get in trouble. And then that's when we start resenting our parents, and then resenting other Asian people, thinking that they're all like that, and it's not true.
Yeah, I think a lot of that kind of goes into when the biggest source of anger, resentment, and victimhood comes from when you are wanting things to be one way and they're not.
They're not. I know. And that's really where we get in trouble. And look, then people say it's like, well, how did things change? Well, I'm a rebel. I do everything differently. The problem with that is then you end up just doing shit just to piss people off, just because you think you're a rebel. I'm not saying your parents are right either. I'm not saying that they are justified to treat you like shit if they continue to do that, right? If they're not treating you well, then stand up for it. But if they are, but they just won't love you and hug them, then the best thing you can do is actually just show them love. Just show them unconditional love instead of being that brat that says, well, fuck you, parents. And then up yours, Asian guys and girls. It's like, why don't you just love them for who they are? And then you can change. You don't have to be like that. What do you have to do with your parents' life? They're living their life. Live your own freaking life. Why don't you stop spending your time watching somebody else's life like a reality television show and pay attention to your own life?
Yeah. And I think actually it points to when you mentioned the whole rebel thing, I remember reading psychological books on psychology. That's a little bit redundant, but the whole like sometimes actually like it's funny when I'm doing interviews, my mind's going faster than like my words that are coming out, and I'm like, oh, now I'm repeating myself. Fuck. But actually, rebelling is still a reactionary response, right? Because they're trying. It's almost like I'll show you, but still based on you have power over me, or I give you power over me, so I need to show you. And it's like, that's not real healing, though.
I would say the same thing. You're literally giving up the only choice and the only thing you have, which is the way you react to it, right? That's what you're giving up. You're literally giving up your choice, free will, and giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really good point about the bratty syndrome. I know different dating coaches have coined it like little emperor syndrome, but it's more of the
I've
whole.
never heard of that.
Yeah, it's quite good, right? Like I kind of want to steal it. Yeah, but it's like when a guy just expects the world to conform to how they think it should be. And again, this goes back to the anger, resentment. That they're like so focused on outside. And you're right. It's just like we can only change ourselves. And yes, we can band together as Asian men and help form a movement to, affect the media and all that stuff. That's all good. But it all kind of starts with ourselves. And it's so much better to like live your life and work on yourself as opposed to always reading and like being angry at people. Like I know it sounds like common sense, but a lot of guys don't follow that advice.
Totally. We're too concerned about other people right now instead of too concerned about ourselves. Look, I get it. I used to be there. Like, they don't believe me when I used to be there, but I used to hardcore be there, especially when I lived in New York City. And I could also say this too. Maybe it was my fault because, like you said earlier, nobody likes an angry vibe in a person. Why would you want to be around it? And I was just so angry about it all the time that, yeah, of course, no one's going to be one around me. And when I say like this too, and I'm sure you believe this too, Jeremy, but like when we say like it starts with us, it really does mean like us, like as even like me and you, right? It starts with us. Yes, it starts with me first, like me as in Kevin, you as in Jeremy, and then us as in together. Because I just had this discussion yesterday with someone. I personally think Asian men are the furthest behind right now when it comes to like progression and anything besides business and money, right? Like we are the furthest behind in like expressing ourselves, masculinity, having change, or even wanting to speak up about change, and they want to justify not changing, but that's fine. They can live their lives, but this is really for the people who like want to progress but don't feel like they can. And I just find that there's a lot of people out there who just keep making these dumb excuses, like why not to improve. The world, like you said, should conform to them instead. But it's like you got a lot of anger to heal. You got a lot of shit you got to work on. And it really does start with you first, but then we can help you. The other men can help you around there. Stop looking for a woman for approval. It's great if they can give you approval and you're working on yourself at the same time. But the problem is we are just looking for approval from other people, not just women. We're looking for approval from other people, period. And it's like a shitty cycle to be going through. We have a lot of work and we have a lot of hurt to heal first. And we're just far behind, but I'm not giving up on it. I think we have a lot of potential.
Yeah, we definitely do. And I do agree with that. Like, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of inner work to be done specifically. And as we keep doing that and working on ourselves, I think you mentioned a really good point yesterday, Kevin, about how, when it comes to like political activism, like actually more so social activism, Asian people don't really band together, or they're not known for it. And I'm sure for all the Asian activists that have been campaigning, let's say, for better representation in the media and in Hollywood, really good on them. So I'm not denying that. But I will say, like, when I instantly think about representation and unity and actually caring about this stuff, like, I know for a fact the Hispanic community, as well as the Black community in the United States specifically, like they're known for that. And I think for a lot of Asian people, like, unfortunately, it goes to the whole, like, we can make jokes about Asian people at different Hollywood awards, and no one's going to really say anything, or they're not going to do anything about it. And I think that as we work on ourselves and band together, more and more good things will be coming for the future, as well as current generations of Asian men.
Yeah, I think what you were saying too is we don't really help each other out, and it's a shame because I call it the token Asian syndrome because like we just feel like there can only be one of us at the top or in that same level. And it all comes from just feeling like there's not enough room. There's a scarcity mentality when it comes to success, maybe even attractiveness, or trying to get somewhere on top, or with women, or with whatever. And, you know, when you look at the Jews, even, right, the Jews got it down. They only do business with themselves, it seems like. They
Yeah.
only hire themselves in Hollywood. And yet here we are, we're doing the opposite. We don't want to hire ourselves. This is mostly American culture, obviously, you know. But like I'm just saying that like even in other cultures, it's like you gotta be really freaking special to like get into their circle half the time. Where it's like us, it's just like, oh, you're white, you're allowed over the border.
Like, yeah, come over. Here's special treatment.
Yeah. What a low standard that is, you know? What a low feeling of self-respect for your own identity and your own race and who you are. You know, that's a very low thing to do.
Yeah, and I gotta say, on that point, for the Asian guys that are listening to this bit, specifically in terms of that white worship part, how would you recommend people to get out of that? Because that thing drives me fucking crazy. I'm actually probably, I wouldn't call myself an Asian nationalist, but are you familiar with that show on Netflix, Ugly Delicious, by any chance?
No, I heard about it, but that's the chef, right?
Yeah, he's a Korean
Yeah.
American, and he's like kind of known for like promoting Asian food because like they might take him to like street tacos, and then he's like, "Hey, this is like the Chinese dim sum thing, right? That's like a street taco," and he's always like promoting Asian food. And my girlfriend's like, "You are totally that guy. Like every time we go out to eat, you're like, dude, Asian food's better." So I might kind of swing to too much on the spectrum, but I think it drives me crazy when Asian people don't have pride in their cultures. Because if you think about the culture of, let's say Korea, Japan, or China, like, of course, there's a lot of shit behind it, but there's a lot of things to be proud of, right? So, Kevin, the question I have for you is for an Asian guy that is willing to admit to himself that he does kind of put white people on a pedestal, and specifically for the Asian guy that wants to date white girls, what would be your advice to him in terms of building pride and respect in himself as well as his culture?
Right. So the way I did it, and this is probably the worst way to do it that I don't recommend, which is to be with as many white girls as you can. To realize that you're probably just chasing the wrong thing. You're going to get super frustrated. You're going to realize it's super limiting. And you'll actually maybe even realize, oh, I really actually prefer Asian girls. Maybe at the end of this. That's kind of what happened to me. It's like no amount of, or whoever I was dating was going to really fulfill me because there was a part of me that was denying who I really am, which was actually not, which goes into the second piece of advice. I wasn't embracing my identity. And when I mean embrace, I mean the freaking good and the bad that comes with it. So the martial arts, yes. But what are you going to do with it? Are you going to like just sulk in your shit and just say, oh, you know, Bruce Lee's like dead, all to us and blah, blah, blah. We can do something about it. What about when you were in Korea, you having Korean food, right? Or what movies are you going to start watching? What people are you going to start surrounding yourself around? For instance, like I found myself only surrounding myself around white people for a while. It was really lonely, to tell you the truth, because you can't talk about this shit. You got to actually end up making fun of your own race and yourself just to get in or get any laughs. which feels good temporarily because who doesn't like to laugh? But it feels like shit because you're like, oh my God, this is like really what they think of Asians. And this is not cool. And yeah, they say, oh yeah, it's just a joke. Is it? I mean, the fact that there's only me here, the token Asian guy, is it really the joke? I mean, there's 3 billion Asian guys and there's only one person at this table who's Asian. Is it really a joke? So I would say you really have to embrace it. You have to embrace the other race to the other gender. You have to really embrace the other gender of the same race too, because if you actually say, and this is a shitty thing to say to another race of your same gender or a different gender, is that I don't find Asian men attractive or I don't find Asian women attractive, but yet you are Asian. It's definitely what I've spotted as a form of self-hatred. There's something you're really ashamed about that you can't embrace about being Asian. It's totally repelling you towards it, repelling you away from it. So you got to figure out what that is and really make an amends towards it, really. You know, you have to be okay with it. And you actually, not even just okay, but even start to fucking love it. You know, a lot of people ask me, say, well, so what do you think about this K-pop thing? They're skinny, they're girly. And I'm like, good, at least it's getting the word out. Look, I don't want to look like that, but that's just me. And I'm not going to put them down because they look like that. They're doing a good thing still. They're entertaining, they're talented, they're getting the culture out there more. That's a good thing. It's just that we're so quick to shit on the other person whenever we see another Asian person start getting ahead. But I can understand that because nothing's worse than watching people get ahead, but you're still behind. But you're not trying and you're not doing anything. All you're doing is complaining. Nothing's worse than that. So I can see why they're pissed off because a lot of Asians don't want to take action. You know, you really don't see too many of that. They only want to keep doing what's safe, which is let's just be very successful doctors and lawyers. I don't even know why I said lawyers. There's no Asian lawyers, just doctors. But it's like, let's just be a really good Asian doctor. That's all I know.
Yeah. And I think it's on a point what you mentioned, the self-hatred. You know, you hate something. I'll rephrase it this way. When you find yourself hating something about someone else and judging them really harshly for it, quite oftentimes that is what you're disowning in yourself and what you don't like about yourself. It's like the guys I've noticed that always say, man, women, like, they're fucking suck. They just want a guy that's rich and has a big dick and all that stuff, right? And again, I'm not denying that, you know, having ample body parts and being tall, good looking, and having money is attractive to women. But then these are the same guys that are objectifying the shit out of women and just trying to have sex with them without regards to who they are as human beings. And I'm just like, you have become the thing that you hate. And this is understandable, but it's always like a little bit of a mind fuck when people realize that. And you touched upon a really good point is like, you got to embrace everything about it. Like all the parts of being Asian. You can't, it's not like a pick and choose thing where you're like, I like being Asian because of insert good qualities, but all the other stuff that comes with it that you think is a negative, you can't just disown it. Like, I think full acceptance and love for who you are, where you came from is absolutely critical because again, anything that becomes disowned, and this is again more of the coaching, relationship, confidence side of me speaking, anything you disown and try to repress, it always comes out in a really weird way. And for a lot of the Asian guys, like it's like trying to have sex with a lot of girls, or always trying to be successful and like hating on other Asian guys, or thinking like, hey, I'm better than other Asian guys because I have white girls, right? This is very fucking common, by the way, for a lot of Asian guys.
Yeah. And I understand that too, because I think I was definitely fooled and brainwashed to believe that you are better. You're an exception, as like a white person would say. And I'm like, really? Am I though? Like, I don't think so. You know, because I can't be the only Asian guy you find attractive. There's got to be, and there are. It's just that I just so happened to come in their path at that time. Yeah. But it is kind of crazy, man, like how we will compete with ourselves that way by trying to have like a white girlfriend and one up each other, or be that guy who has that car with all these girls in here. I mean, like, look, I'm sure white people do the same shit, but it's like But it's amazing how we are doing that to ourselves, and we're not even on top of the top of the game or on the list, and it's just or on top of mind for people. And talking about embracing, like we have to embrace everything that even means the other gender. You have to embrace that. You have to embrace and love everything about it. And yeah, it's so hard for people because they don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and it definitely is a work in progress too, because
Totally.
I think it's easier. It goes back and forth, right? It's not one or the other, but I think the easiest way to really start loving yourself and loving people is to do both at the same time. A
Hmm.
lot of times, Asian guys, actually guys in general, will always get hung up on these mental, cognitive dissonance threads where it's like the chicken and egg. Like, do I love myself first before I love other people? Vice versa. But I
Yeah.
think like if you start showing love for other people, like your parents that you might resent for one reason or another, for Asian women, for other people,
Yeah.
you're going to be able to start feeling that more and receiving it more, vice versa, as well as when you're working with yourself. And I think when a person's doing the inner and outer work at the same time, it's a very powerful combination.
Totally. I mean, that's why I say to people, like, when I talk about the body and exercising and moving, I don't mean bodybuilding. But yes, you moving and exercising and taking care of yourself, in by default, you start looking better. You just do. But moving is part of it. Like you just have to. That's what we are made to do. And it is the improvement of the outer and inner. It's improving the outer body, which in tune actually helps fix the inner too. And then because it's the inner work that's being fixed, the outer also looks better too. It's not one or the other. It's almost like trying to chop your head off and separate the body from the head. You're just not going to go anywhere. It just doesn't make any sense either. It's like denying that we're actually a human being and we have a heart, mind, and body and a soul, if you want to go that far, right? Like, I don't know where people's spiritual paths are, but I believe we have this special spiritual soul and energy, and to deny all of that and try to separate it and only work out one is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Like as you said, we are a heart, mind, body, and potentially soul. Again, depending on their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And for me, more on the coaching methods, I'm sure that you use or I use, it has to be everything at once, right? Because like your body, if you are looking at it from strictly a physical point of view, like the mind, heart, and body, they're all interconnected, and you can't do one without the other. And I think a lot of times we're kind of diving more into like coaching methodology, but a lot of times people only focus excessively on the brain. This is
Yeah.
for Asian guys are too focused on the thoughts, but they're not feeling enough in their heart, right? They're not listening to their gut. They're not listening to what their body's telling them. And I think the more in tune you become with your whole self and you're able to affect all of yourself at once, because you are basically a mini ecosystem and environment, the
Yeah.
better and faster that inner work and outer work will happen at the same time.
Well, actually, that's another thought you brought up is that I realized there's one thing in common, at least for what I've been seeing with a lot of people just in general, why they can't get this work. Why don't they get it? And I believe it comes down to it's because we're numbing ourselves with food. We're numbing ourselves with drugs and alcohol. Of
Yeah.
course you can't get this because you're numb. So none of this like mind work is going to do anything because you're numb. It just won't. So that's why I say it's like I think there actually is a more of a pecking order of things you should work on, because like let's just say you don't change your numbing of your body, you don't do drugs or alcohol, and just somehow all of a sudden you do the right drug for instance, and you get psychologically enhanced, and it's temporary though. But there's other things. That's why I love nutrition even, is because that's something that you can always rely on, and it works 100%. It won't numb your body, so you can take this coaching process that you are giving to other people, or I am, or your therapist, whatever, or your spiritual teacher. You can actually start processing things because you're not numb to it anymore. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize. They're like, well, no, I'm not numb to it. I'm alive. I was like, you have no clue. I rarely see people who get super fit and obsessed about it even, right? Somebody who actually gets fit, I very rarely see them ever go back and be like, yeah, it didn't work. And I'm never going to go like, look at my nutrition again or exercise. I just haven't come across that yet in my life, really.
Yeah.
And because it's just so hard to go back to the way you used to be. You just don't feel right. You don't see the world right, even.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that too, because like literally, if your body's stronger and it looks sexier too, and you just feel better, like why would you want to go back to being, let's say, more out of shape, being overweight,
Yeah.
and like just feeling like shit? And yeah, that makes complete sense to me because it's almost like, there's usually a little bit of a gap when someone's wanting to change, that they're over here, they want to get to here. But once you actually experience up there, you're like, I have such a visceral reaction to that and experience that. Why would I ever want to go back down?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So, Kevin, we had a lot of really good points that you covered in terms of helping Asian guys with their masculinity. I think a lot of guys will get a lot of value out of it, especially the people that are willing to open themselves up and be like, oh my God, they're describing self hatred. Actually, I don't really like myself, my race. So, for the guys listening, if you're willing to keep an open mind, you'll get a lot out of Kevin's wisdom. And with all that being said, Kevin, what is going on in your life? What do you want to let the audience know about? And how can they find out and learn more about
Actually, I want to add on to that one quick second, Jeremy, is that
you?
if they're not ready for this, I'd actually be curious if in a couple years from now, if they re-listen to this, if they would hear this podcast in a different lens, in a different way, because maybe they've changed and been exposed enough to this and done enough self-work or just grew enough in those 2 years that now this stuff's making sense. So I'd be really curious about that. But recently what I've been doing is I've been part of a documentary. It's called The Ugly Model. It got fully funded, which is super cool, which means that it can be a little bit higher quality production, and it means it'll be finished, cut, and released hopefully next year. The first copy, if I remember the director Doris telling me, is that it'll be out by the end of this year, the first cut and ready to go, and then it'll show in the first film festival in 2019, early, hopefully. And that's what I've been part of. So it's called The Ugly Model. And I've been working on my own coaching business. I've been doing fitness and life coaching. You can find my stuff on kevinkreider.com. And I just started a podcast. It's called Kevin's Corner of the Ugly Truth. So in that podcast, I speak about the ugly truths of media, masculinity, and also modeling and fitness. A lot of people want to lie to you to bring you into their sales market, and I just want to expose a lot of those truths and even like photoshopping and stereotypes. So it's a lot of talking and answering questions. Actually, a lot of people have been sending me questions to answer on the podcast. So if any of your listeners have any questions, like, tell them to email me, because I've actually been listening and literally responding to every one of those questions that I have coming in from the pod and putting it in the podcast and even giving them a shout out too.
Sounds good. And what would be your email address, just for the people that just want to note it mentally? And of course, for all the listeners, I will be putting in the show notes, but just so everyone's aware.
Yeah, so you can actually email me at coaching, COACHING, at Kevin Kreider, KREIDER.com. That's where you can find my email address.
Really cool, man. Well, Kevin, thank you for coming on the show. I did actually donate to that Kickstarter.
Yes.
Documentary. So doing my part, really excited to see it when it comes out. And I got to say, man, like definitely follow Kevin, check out his stuff, send in your questions over to him. He's got really good stuff. And again, Kevin, thanks for being on the show. I know the listeners got a lot out of it.
Thanks, Sherman. Appreciate it, man.